Welcome to this podcast. My name is Abraham Wright, or Abe. I'm sitting next to Wade Burleson, or Wade. This podcast is designed to answer the many questions that we all have. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get into today's question, I want to encourage you to do something. Share this video with those that you know. People have questions, and we want this to be a platform where we can dialogue and discuss your questions.
Yeah, and Abe, the first one last week.
Yeah.
Good start.
Yes.
50 subscribers.
Yep.
So if you want to watch this on a regular basis and don't have to search for it, just click on subscribe, YouTube or your favorite Facebook platform, social media platform,
Yep.
subscribe.
Podcast.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
And then they'll get a notification that we've got a new one.
And then also, would you also comment below? Let us know your thoughts on this. We can still continue the conversation. That would really help us, so make sure you comment below. And then underneath, email us your questions at wabequestions@gmail.com. Again, that's wabequestions with an S @gmail.com. So, Wade, I'm going to throw out the question. This is the first time Wade is hearing this question. I've done a little bit of research, but this is one of the first questions that was sent in, and I want to honor this person. Here's the question. Do we live in a young or old earth? Do we live in a young or old earth? We're going to answer that here in a few seconds. Okay, here we go, Wade. Do we live in a young or old earth? I don't know who's interested in this question, but it was definitely asked first. What are your thoughts on that, Wade?
Well, that's a big question, and
Very
we're
big
only
question.
going to go for about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So let's dialogue a little bit about
Yeah.
it. First of all, I would ask the question from a culture standpoint, why does it matter? In other words, Abe, I know when you go into a science class at the university,
Yeah.
they'll tell you the Earth is billions of years old,
Yeah.
as is the universe.
Yeah.
And that is something that is taught regularly and
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, why is this an important question to ask?
Well, as I've done a little bit of research, Wade, I have found that there are Christians on both sides. So there are people who seem genuine, they love Jesus, they're educated like yourself, and they believe in a old earth or a young earth. So I think it's important so people can see that people can disagree and still be followers of Jesus. And I don't think that this is a saved or lost issue.
Oh, absolutely.
The age of the
Absolutely.
earth.
So I think what I hear you saying is a Christian, a believer in Jesus, might believe in an old earth,
Yeah.
might believe in a young earth, and to us,
Yeah.
our views, it's not a matter of fellowship.
Yep. But some people think it is, and they do. And my thought, Wade, about this young or old earth is when I read the opening of Genesis chapter 1, and you just kind of go through, Moses, I believe he wrote it, 3,000 or so years ago? I don't think he had the same mindset that we have today in the 21st century. I think when Moses wrote Genesis, he was writing primarily who created everything, why he created things, and then he's pointing us to Jesus. But we're making it into sometimes Moses was writing how God created him, when God created. And I just don't see that being the main purpose of Genesis. So that's one of my initial thoughts. I don't think Moses was trying to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thought. And just a little challenge here about Moses. I do believe Moses is the editor of the Pentateuch.
Yep.
But if you notice in the early chapters of Genesis, there's a description about going as far north as Dan.
Wow.
And Dan didn't exist until way later. It's a city in northern Israel.
Wow.
And so what people need to understand is, over time, the Hebrew Scriptures, the Scriptures for the Hebrews, there were several editors that eventually gave to us what we call the Old Testament.
Wow.
So unlike, one of the things that I love about the Scriptures, as you know, I believe the Bible from cover to cover.
Yeah.
It is inspired and infallible and will never lead us into error.
Yeah.
It's God's Word.
Yeah.
But unlike our Muslim friends who believe that the Quran, every single word dropped from Allah, from heaven to earth, and it's sacred. So if the Quran is ever underneath another book, that's a sin against Allah. If the Quran is ever on the floor, you've committed a cardinal sin. Abe, you know, we're not like that.
Of course.
We don't worship, like you said.
It's a God book and a man book.
Boom.
It's both.
And the important thing is we worship the God that the book directs us to,
Amen.
not the book itself. And in my view,
Yeah.
even though I believe in a young earth, and I'll tell you why in just a little bit, I get a little heebie-jeebies. I don't know if you know what that means or not. When I'm around fellow young earth people who are dogmatic like this and say, you don't believe the Bible if you don't believe in the young earth. Oh, no. Just like you.
Okay.
I think there's room in the Church of Jesus Christ.
And so here's another thought. So again, I think that Genesis, Moses deals more with who created everything and why God created everything, not so much when God created it and how. But also, here's my thought. Think about this. When God created Adam, so let's start with the first human on earth, Adam. Did he create him as a baby? Most everybody agrees, no matter what end of the spectrum, he created Adam as a full-grown male. So, when God created the grass or trees, did he create them as baby trees? Or meaning, was Adam going around watering the trees? Most would say, no, God created the grass and the trees mature. And then I think, if God created animals and Adam and trees and grass mature, could he have started with the universe in some areas as mature? Does that make sense?
Well, of course.
Okay,
Of
so
cour- of
that
course
was
it
the
makes
thought I
sense.
had.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that scientists and Christian scientists and
yeah.
Christians in general have to work through.
Yeah.
But if you're not a Christian and you're an evolutionist, and all evolutionists believe in an old Earth, all.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So they believe that things evolved over time.
Yeah.
But if you're a Christian scientist and you believe in an old Earth, then those are the kinds of questions that you have to face. For an evolutionist, that's a silly question.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, because they believe in an old earth.
Well, not just an old Earth. They believe that things evolve. So this is where, if you're a Christian, this is the difficulty. If you believe in an old Earth and God creates, then how do things evolve? How does man evolve? You don't believe man evolves from an amoeba to an ape to a human.
So here's my thoughts. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So if I take that literal, there was a general creation. But then it says, I believe in verse 2, don't quote me exactly, but it talks about the earth being formless and there was darkness, pretty much chaos. And then we see God bringing order. So the gap from Genesis chapter 1, when God seemed to create the universe, the earth, and then in verse 2, when he brought order, I think that gap leaves us room for an old universe or an old earth before he started creating the nature and the man and all that's in creation. He seemed to first start with, there was just an earth, it was blank, it was chaos, and God started bringing order. So again, from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, I think there could be a lot of time.
There could be. By the way, that's the gap theory.
Yeah, I didn't know what it's called.
No, it's called the gap theory.
The gap theory, okay.
It didn't come into existence until after Darwin wrote his book, The Origin of the Species. And it was a way in which Christians could combat the growing scientific theory of evolution.
Yeah.
And so I'm very familiar with the gap theory.
Okay.
And have taught it at times, but I think what people need to understand is prior to Darwin, Christians, Isaac Newton is an example.
Yeah.
And some would debate whether or not he was a believer in Jesus Christ. They would call him a Unitarian, but he was an incredible scientist.
Wow.
No one questioned that God created the earth and the universe in 7 days. That was standard. If you questioned that,
Everybody believes that.
everybody believed that. Wow. Even scientists who maybe didn't have personal faith in Jesus. So I think the bigger issue for us today is in a world that rejects maybe a creator and God, and especially God with us, Jesus.
Yeah.
How are you going to come yourself to a view of the earth that is consistent with what you see Scripture to teach? And it's a big question. And you've done that. You've done it. You hold to the gap theory.
Well, I will say this. I need to make this clear. I'm not saying I hold to the gap theory. I'm just open to those who believe in an old earth and people who believe in a young earth. I really see room for both. And in fact, John Lennox, I believe he's a professor at Oxford. He wrote a book, 7 Days That Divide the World. He says because of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, he says that gap leaves the age of the earth. He uses a big smart word, but pretty much undecided. He said we just don't know.
I see that.
And I think that's hard for Christians to come to that, but I do respect both sides, and I do think there's room for both sides. You can still follow Jesus, and I think God sometimes might be laughing when we, like you said, some of your friends are so dogmatic.
Right.
There's room for both.
There are, and I'll give just kind of a summary of what I believe, and then you can close us out.
Okay.
And, one of my favorite scientists is Isaac Newton. Albert Einstein is right next to him, and Albert Einstein's good friend was a Jewish man by the name of Immanuel Velikovsky. And I love reading Velikovsky. Now, he's considered a quack by many, but he is a cultural anthropologist. He studies nations and peoples, and he has pointed out in his writings that throughout history, in all the nations, South America, China, the Native Americans of the United States, Europe, there are writings that talk about great cataclysms that have come to this earth within recorded history. 1500 BC, 700 BC.
Cataclysmic. What do you
correct.
mean?
Well, the earth, a catastrophe happens.
Wow.
A flood, the sun standing still, if you will, rocks falling from the heavens.
All those places
written in their history? Have written in their histories. So here's the thing that I would just ask every one of you to recognize. And to me, this is what's important. Cataclysms happen. Catastrophes happen. And an evolutionist will tell you that everything just continues gradually and smoothly and the same. Your life's not like that. This world's not like that. And cataclysms occur. And they could happen in your lifetime. The good news is, Abe, we know the God who sits on his throne and is in charge of everything. Isaiah 45, verse 7, I, the Lord, I create catastrophes. I, the Lord, do these things. Why does he do that? Because in the end, Abe, I think what's important is that people come to know him and not be satisfied or secure in the things of this life.
Wow. Okay, so young or old earth, you believe, lean towards a young earth.
I do. But I have no problems with those who believe in the
No problems. Okay, so here's what I want to invite you all to do that are watching. Comment below. I love, Wade, you were dialoguing with someone who wrote a lot of good comments, and I love how you were staying engaged. Comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your questions. Share this with people that you know. But also remember, if you have a question, you can also email us at wabequestions@gmail.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to our second podcast. Look forward to seeing you next week.